So we have Sister Navira Alifa. It's a chemical engineer. Nothing major on that. Nothing major at all. My youngest son is a sophomore, and he's in robotics engineering as well, with 5 years of experience in the engineer industry, and more recently as social entrepreneur, founding a project called the Muslim Potential, aimed at helping driven Muslims to overcome self-doubt and fears, realign with purpose, and take decisive, value-driven action. Please welcome Sister Navira.
Assalamu alaikum. Bismillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajmain. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa ahlul uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. I am very honored to be here in this room with you all today. As you may have heard from the introduction, my expertise is not in finance, but alhamdulillah, my background has a lot to do with finances. So that's what we're going to talk about. All right. So this brings up something that I thought about several years before I had graduated from my undergrad. And that was that I realized that this whole time, ever since I was a little girl, I had my parents' allowance. And it was so strange to me because even as a baby, before I even knew how to make dua for rizq, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had already given me something for about 20-something years through my parents. And now I was slowly going to enter the corporate world. I was going to enter the corporate world, and I was still that little girl. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was just removing my parents, and now I was now in charge of distributing the wealth that I had. Same with all of us here in this room right now. As I was the recipient of my parents' wealth, someone is a receiver of the wealth that you have in your bank account right now. There's someone's name written on there. So what we're going to talk about today is about distribution. And I know it's something we've already talked about here, but we're actually going to go high level because, as I mentioned, I'm not a finance expert, so we'll have a little bit of an outsider's perspective and go back into high level. So building wealth with intention. So as we all know, there's about 2 billion Muslims worldwide. And somehow we have this mindset that we're powerless, that we're inferior. But by numbers alone, we know that there's a lot of us here. So why are our brothers and sisters still suffering? It doesn't make sense. And before we start delving into all of the spiritual dimensions that we can talk about diseases of the heart and Allahu A'lam, right? All of the factors that are contributing. But if we talk about numbers alone, there's a lot of us here. So there's a paradox, okay? So Dinar Standard had this report, and they said that Muslims actually hold trillions, not billions, trillions of dollars in global, not just in the US, not just in the West, not just in the East, everywhere. Global economic power. In fact, we had spent about $2.43 trillion in core sectors, including food and pharmaceuticals, travel, media. Who is saying that we don't have resources? We have it. But as we know, okay, this presentation got a little scattered. Our efforts are scattered. We struggle with collaborating with each other and seeing the best in one another, seeing each other's strengths. We struggle, we're very reactive. Alhamdulillah, we're a very generous ummah, but we don't think long-term. As Sheikh Joe Bradford mentioned earlier, we don't think long-term. It's gonna take those small steps and really valuing the small steps in order to create massive change. We're also secularized. We think in quantity, and trust me, I've been there learning as an engineer. We think numbers, But there's something else behind it. Islam teaches us that there's more to the quantity, there's more to the number. And we're very individualistic. We think me and my family and the people who look like me and think like me. But actually, there's a higher level. Islam bonds us. We become brothers and sisters, and that should be our priority. The people that we are bonded to by La ilaha illallah. So clearly, we don't have a quantity issue. There's no quantity issue here. We have a quality issue. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us in Surah Al-Baqarah, but those who were certain that one day they were going to meet Allah, they said, how many a small company has overcome a large company by the permission of Allah? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with the patient. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us here, it's actually not about the quantity, it's actually not about the ROI, even though the ROI is important. But why is the ROI important? Because we're trying to reach the pleasure of Allah. Allah is the one who's going to move us. And so if a small company, if a small group of people Allah can bring to victory, then what about the Ummah that has 2 billion people around the world? What about the Ummah that holds trillions in global economic power? That's something there. That's a privilege we have. That's a responsibility. So our wealth is a trust, and our strategic distribution is part of our worship. It's not an option. And so I apologize, this kind of got scattered too. But I grew up in the West, in the United States, in the UK, and also in the East in Indonesia. And so this is what I see from an outsider's perspective. We're very influenced by this post-colonialism and immigration idea. Of course, we come to the West with the hope of a better economic life, but we also carry with us a survivalistic mindset. Very scarce, that there's not enough out there, there's not enough opportunity. And so we can only be the doctors, the engineers, the lawyers, when actually Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us all special gifts, every single one of us. There's abundance. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that He is Ar-Razak, right? And again, something that's been mentioned often here already in the conference is that there's a lot of confusion around money beyond this room. So it's a responsibility with the people in this room to be able to communicate it to the outside world in very simple, average Muslim terms, what this wealth thing is all about. How can I handle my wealth? Again, we're very consumeristic. We can talk a little bit more about that. And we're also very detached to our legacy of excellence. And we mention it a lot, but I want to highlight a few individuals here. So when we talk about investors, the first thing that comes to mind are some men on Wall Street. And the men on Wall Street, they've got the knowledge of finance, they've got the infrastructure to do what they need to do. But our first investor was not only just a woman. She was in the middle of a desert with another man that she trusted, that he had leadership qualities, and he was carrying the truth. He was carrying something of value. And she decided that she was going to use her wealth, not for the sake of the ROI alone, but to amplify value, to amplify the truth. And when she saw someone who was trustworthy to be leading, she also used her money as a privilege, as an advantage, to enable this path. And she became the security blanket for Islam. Then we have Umar ibn Abdulaziz, who is an Umayyad caliph, and he was known for being just. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put so much barakah in the 2 years. He led here for 2 years of leadership, and he redistributed wealth to the point that there was no one for people to give zakat to. Now we would think that would be impossible today, but this is a reminder of it starts with our intention, it starts with our connection with Allah, and what Allah blesses, even something like this is possible. Then we have Fatima al-Fihri. She was someone who inherited money from her dad. And today we might think, oh, nepotism, all this stuff. But no, Fatima al-Fihri, she knew what she had. She knew the privileges that she had. but she also thought about her akhirah. She thought about the long term. What can I do? She decided, and today we see the results of her work. She was the founder of the first degree-granting university in the world, not just for Muslims, but also for non-Muslims. And can you imagine today the effects of her work, the amount of rewards that she's getting in her grave right now from using the inheritance from her father to create the first university that gives degrees in the world? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us in Surah Ra'd, indeed, Allah would never change a people's state of favor until they change their own state of faith. Just a reminder that it starts inside. It starts in our mindset. What do you think is possible? Allah tells us with Him, anything's possible. Do we really believe that? Or do we believe that we're constrained by the systems that are held before us? So what is one money mindset or behavior that you can start to emulate from those who came before us? And I want to take a moment here. We talked a little bit about quantity, but what we want to look at is what is the actual value of the money you have in your bank account? We might have people in this room who have 7 figures, 6 figures, 5, 4, 3, 2, or 1. But what barakah tells us is that someone who has $100 in their pocket right now, it might weigh a lot heavier than the one who has 7 figures in their bank account. That's your barakah. That's the blessings of your wealth in the unseen. So the Prophet ﷺ reminds us, do not belittle any good. Even if you think today it's a small step, oh, I'm just one person in a whole globe and there's 2 billion Muslims, I'm just 1 out of 2 billion. No, the Prophet ﷺ says, don't belittle it. You don't know. You don't know how far Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will stretch your efforts. And even here, meeting your brother with a cheerful face. Don't belittle that. So some suggestions. This is very, very simple, but we're gonna talk a little bit more of maybe some little tweaks that we can start implementing. So spending. We're gonna talk a little bit more about personal, how we spend personally. Every $1 is like a chess move in the economic market. It's a vote that you're making, a value vote. Every $1 is a market move. We're funding someone's value every time we're spending $1. We think, oh, we're just $1, $5. No, you're funding someone's values. Whose values are you funding? And not to get it overwhelmed, though, we don't expect perfection, but if we're looking for ways to improve, start thinking about even the small. And investing. When we start thinking about investing, alhamdulillah, we are a community that thinks a lot about waqf and water wells and institution, which is great. But we also want to start thinking outside the box. For example, I know we have a lot of opportunities that can be made with building each other up in terms of training. If we see a youth, for example, that they're excelling in a certain way, to start creating funding, even if it's not something super official. Just some ideas. And then circulation. Circulation was talked about before, but what I want to emphasize here with circulation, again, it's about the values. It's not necessarily about who is right, but what is right. It could be a non-Muslim that's creating a great company or product, and they're reflecting Muslim values. So we want to start supporting that. Or it could be, or we can also start to try helping our Muslim brothers and sisters. So I want to give an example here. Again, not expecting perfection, but just to bring the point home. For example, you have 2 cartons of eggs. One is $3, and maybe they don't feed the animals well. The other is $6, but they let the chickens roam, they feed the animals well. When you look at it from an economic standpoint, it doesn't make sense to buy the $6 one. It really doesn't. Quantifiably, we know $3, what? I can buy 2 cartons of this one. But we think about barakah. This one might hold way more barakah than the one that's on your right hand. And what does that mean? If you had $100 and you bought this one instead, you're left with $94. That $94 might have more barakah that Allah stretches, and it can buy so much more with it than the $97 that you would have had otherwise. And then build. So if you have enough to cover your responsibilities, it might be time to start innovating, start giving back. And that's kind of the period that I personally am in now. After working in corporate for a couple of years, I decided, let me try something out. Let me try to start creating, start producing instead of just consuming. So what will you build for the akhirah with the wealth that you already have? Again, we talk a lot about this because we've been asking, what can we do for our brothers and sisters? Why are brothers and sisters still suffering? I'd say part of it is don't belittle the little. What you already have in your hands right now holds power. If one person, everyone actually in this room just starts being more intentional with the $5 you have, maybe we can start making a difference. Again, instead of scattered, we can start working collectively. Start seeing the best in each other. Start filling each other's gaps instead of tearing each other down. Reactive instead of reactive, proactive. Start thinking long term. Instead of secular, we start thinking with the deen in mind. We start thinking with the barakah, value-driven decision purchase making instead of just price. And then instead of individualistic, we think collective. My brothers and sisters, we are all brothers and sisters in this room, and that bond should be so strong that if I were to trip off of this stage, or something were to happen to me, or something were to happen to you, it would hurt me as it would my own family member. So what role will you be playing in rebuilding our economic power? And we'll skip over this. I'll end with this reminder. In Surah Al-Hujurat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, the true believers are only those who believe in Allah and His Messenger, never doubting, and strive with their wealth and their lives in the cause of Allah. And they are the ones true in faith. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enable us to live up to the potential that He has given us and make use of us in His deen as movers, builders, shakers, change makers of this society with the privileges that He has given us, that inshallah we see the rewards not only here but in the next, inshallah. Ameen ya Rabbal Alameen. This is part of my efforts in the Muslim Potential. This is what I'm starting. I help coach ambitious women who have worked in the corporate world for a couple of years and have decided to start their own thing. I also help Muslim professionals who decide that they want to stay where they are and help them gain clarity and confidence with what they're doing. Jazakumullah khair. Thank you again. This is an honor. Thank you to the NACIF team. And I leave it to you now. Thank you.